23%. That's not a guess. That's not a supplement company's marketing number. That's a clinically measured drop in blood sugar after a single meal from a spice that's been sitting in your kitchen cabinet, probably for years. Surprised. And here's what really gets me. The research behind this, it's not new. It's not buried. It's sitting right there on PubMed. Published, peer-reviewed, replicated across multiple countries. Dozens of randomized controlled trials, meta-analyses involving over 3,000 patients. And yet, your doctor has never mentioned it, not once. Your endocrinologist, the specialist you waited 3 months to see, has never written it down. Your pharmacist has never once looked up from the counter and said, "Hey, before you fill this refill, have you tried this?" And it's not because they're bad doctors. Most of them are doing their best. But the system they work in, it doesn't reward them for talking about food. It rewards prescriptions. It rewards referrals. It rewards 15-minute appointments with a diagnosis code and a pharmacy order. A spice doesn't have a diagnosis code. A spice doesn't have a sales rep who shows up with lunch and a brochure. So it gets ignored, even when the evidence is overwhelming. That's exactly what this video is about. This is Senior Health Blog. And today I'm going to walk you through something that, honestly, I've been wanting to make this video for a while now, because the science here is not subtle, it's not ambiguous, and the fact that most diabetics have never been told about it, that bothers me. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you exactly how this spice works inside your body. At the cellular level, not vague claims, not "it might help," the actual mechanism. Then, I'm going to rank 7 specific ways it protects your blood sugar, from least powerful to most powerful. And number 1 on that list, I gotta be honest, even I had to read the study twice. But, and this is important, I'm also going to show you the one version of this spice that can damage your liver, because most people are using the wrong kind, and nobody tells them that either. Stay with me on this one, because by the end, you'll know more about this spice than 90% of the doctors in America. And if you're someone who believes you deserve the full truth about your own health, not the watered-down 15-minute appointment version, drop the word truth in the comments right now. Let me know you're here. Let me know you're paying attention, because this one matters. All right, before I get into the ranked list, I need to clear something up, because there's a lot of bad information floating around about this spice, and if I don't correct it now, the rest of this video won't land the way it should. The spice is cinnamon. Now, stop. I know what you're thinking. Cinnamon! I've heard that before. Didn't they debunk that? No, they didn't debunk it. What happened is, a few poorly designed studies came out years ago. Small sample sizes, wrong dosage, wrong type of cinnamon, and the media ran with it. Cinnamon doesn't work. Headlines everywhere. And that was it. Conversation over. Doctors stopped looking, patients stopped asking, and a spice with genuine, measurable, replicated clinical effects on blood sugar got filed away under old wives' tales. That's not science, that's laziness. Here's what the actual research says. And I mean the real research. Not a blog post, not a morning show segment. The clinical trials. A 2024 meta-analysis. And for those who don't know, a meta-analysis is the highest level of scientific evidence. It pools together dozens of individual trials. This one looked at 28 randomized controlled trials involving 3,054 patients with type 2 diabetes. The result? Cinnamon supplementation produced a statistically significant reduction in fasting blood glucose. Not a maybe, not a trend. A significant, measurable reduction. They also found a meaningful drop in postprandial glucose. That's your blood sugar after eating, by an average of 39 milligrams per deciliter. Let me say that again. 39 points lower after a meal. Now, I want you to think about what your doctor would say if a new drug did that. They'd call it a breakthrough. They'd write you a prescription before you left the office. But because it's a spice that costs less than $1 a week, nobody talks about it. And look, that's frustrating. But here's where it gets worse. A separate study, published in Diabetes Care, took 60 people with type 2 diabetes, split them into groups, gave them 1, 3, or 6 grams of cinnamon per day. Just plain cinnamon. After 40 days, all 3 groups showed a reduction in fasting blood sugar between 18 and 29%. All 3 groups. Even the group taking just 1 gram, that's less than half a teaspoon. And the placebo group, no change. So let me be really clear here. This is not a folk remedy. This is not something your neighbor heard from a magazine. This is peer-reviewed, placebo-controlled, replicated clinical evidence. And you were never told. Now, let's talk about why it works. Because the mechanism, this is the part that changes everything. Okay? Here's where I need you to focus. Because once you understand this mechanism, you'll never look at this spice the same way again. When you eat food, especially carbohydrates, your blood sugar rises. That's normal. Your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin is the key. It unlocks the door on your muscle cells and fat cells so glucose can get inside and be used for energy. That's how it's supposed to work. But here's the problem. After 60, and especially if you have insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, those doors start to stick. The insulin key is there. It's turning. But the lock is jammed. The technical term is impaired GLUT4 translocation. GLUT4 is a glucose transporter. It's the actual doorway on the surface of your muscle cells that lets sugar in. In a healthy, insulin-sensitive person, insulin signals GLUT4 to rise to the cell surface. Sugar goes in, blood sugar drops. Done. But in someone with insulin resistance, GLUT4 stays trapped inside the cell. It never makes it to the surface. So sugar stays in the blood. And your blood sugar stays elevated, even though insulin is screaming at the cell to open up. Now here's what cinnamon does. And this is not a theory. This has been demonstrated in laboratory studies, published in peer-reviewed journals. Cinnamon contains a compound called cinnamaldehyde. That's the compound that gives cinnamon its smell, its taste. But it does something else. Cinnamaldehyde activates a pathway called AMPK. AMP-activated protein kinase. When AMPK is activated, it forces GLUT4 to move to the cell surface, independently of insulin. I need you to hear that again. It forces the glucose transporter to open without needing insulin to do the job. That's not the same as a drug. That's not adding more insulin. That's not forcing the pancreas to work harder. It's going around the broken lock entirely and opening a different door. There's also a second compound, a polyphenol, called MHCP, methyl hydroxychalcone polymer. This one actually mimics insulin itself. It activates the same signaling cascade, the IRS-PI3K pathway, that insulin uses. It's essentially a plant-based insulin mimic. And studies show it also promotes glycogen synthesis, meaning it helps your liver store glucose properly instead of dumping it back into your blood. So you've got 2 mechanisms. One opens the cell door without insulin. The other mimics insulin to trigger the normal pathway. Both reduce blood sugar. Both are activated by compounds found in cinnamon. And here's the kicker. A 2007 study, published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, found that when subjects ate a carbohydrate-heavy meal with cinnamon added, cinnamon delayed gastric emptying, meaning the food moved through the stomach more slowly, which means the sugar hit the bloodstream more gradually, which means no spike. 3 mechanisms, 1 spice. And yet your doctor never mentioned it. And I want to pause here for a second, because I know some of you are thinking, if this is real, why doesn't everybody know about this? And the answer is uncomfortable. The clinical trial system in most countries is designed around pharmaceutical compounds. A drug company invests $200 million to get a new medication through trials, FDA approval, marketing. They recoup that investment through patent protection and pricing. That's the model. That's how the system sustains itself. Cinnamon can't be patented. Nobody owns it. So nobody has a $200 million incentive to run the massive, multi-center Phase 3 trials that would make cinnamon official. The studies that exist, they were funded by universities, by small grants, by researchers in Iran, India, Pakistan, Sweden, Korea, scientists who were curious enough to test what traditional medicine had been saying for centuries. And those studies, dozens of them, keep showing the same thing. Cinnamon works, not as a cure, not as a miracle, but as a measurable, consistent, clinically significant tool for improving blood sugar. But without a pharmaceutical company behind it. No one markets it. No one puts it in a glossy brochure. No one trains your doctor to recommend it. And so it sits, in your spice cabinet, doing nothing, until today. Now. Let's get into the ranked list. 7 ways cinnamon protects your blood sugar, worst to best. Now, everything I've just explained happens during the day. When you eat, when your body is processing food. But there's a whole other side to this. What happens to your blood sugar while you sleep? Between midnight and about 4 in the morning, your liver does something that catches most people completely off guard. That's actually something I wrote a full guide about. It's called the Midnight Insulin Trap. I'll leave the link in the description below. But let's keep going, because what's coming next in this list is gonna surprise you. All right, number 7 on the list. And look, this one doesn't sound dramatic, but once I explain it, you'll realize it affects every single meal you eat. When you eat a meal, let's say rice, pasta, bread, potatoes, the speed at which that food leaves your stomach determines how fast sugar hits your bloodstream. Fast emptying, big spike. Slow emptying, gradual rise. Much easier for your body to handle. Most blood sugar problems aren't about what you eat. They're about how fast you eat it. And by fast, I don't mean chewing speed. I mean how quickly your stomach pushes food into your small intestine, where it gets absorbed. Now here's what researchers at Lund University in Sweden discovered. They took healthy subjects, fed them rice pudding, a high glycemic food. One group got plain rice pudding. The other group got the same rice pudding, with 6 grams of cinnamon mixed in. The cinnamon group showed significantly lower postprandial blood glucose, and when they measured gastric emptying using real-time ultrasound, the cinnamon group's stomachs emptied more slowly. The food sat longer. The sugar released more gradually. And here's what's interesting. The researchers noted that the blood sugar reduction was actually greater than what the slowed emptying alone could explain, meaning cinnamon was doing something else on top of the speed break. That something else is what's coming in the next 6 items. But number 7 alone, slowing gastric emptying, is something most diabetics would benefit from at every single meal. And nobody tells them. And here's a practical note. You don't need a capsule for this one. You don't need a supplement. Just adding cinnamon to your meal, directly onto your food, activates this mechanism. Sprinkle it on oatmeal, stir it into warm water, mix it into a sauce. The delivery method in this particular study was cinnamon added directly to the food, not taken separately, not as a pill, as a spice, on a meal. That's how accessible this is. And yet, most diabetic education programs, they talk about carb counting, medication timing, maybe exercise. They never say, add half a teaspoon of this spice to your plate. All right, let's move on. Because the next one is about your morning number. And if your fasting glucose frustrates you, listen carefully. Number 6. And this one hits close to home for a lot of you. You wake up in the morning. You haven't eaten for 10, maybe 12 hours. You check your blood sugar. And it's high, higher than when you went to bed. And you think, how? I didn't eat anything. What went wrong? Here's what happened. While you slept, your liver started producing glucose on its own. It's called hepatic gluconeogenesis. And it's a survival mechanism, your body's way of making sure your brain has fuel overnight. But in people with insulin resistance, the liver overproduces, way more glucose than you need. And by morning, your blood sugar is elevated before you've even had breakfast. Now, a 2019 meta-analysis, looking at 18 randomized clinical trials, found that cinnamon supplementation reduced fasting blood sugar by an average of 19.26 milligrams per deciliter compared to placebo. That's your morning number, the one that frustrates you, the one your doctor keeps saying is borderline. And in the landmark study by Kahn and colleagues, published in Diabetes Care, 2003, fasting glucose dropped between 18 and 29% over 40 days. In all dosage groups, 1 gram, 3 grams, 6 grams. All of them worked. Now, here's the part that nobody talks about. The benefits persisted even after the subjects stopped taking cinnamon. For 20 days after they stopped, their fasting glucose was still lower than the placebo group. That suggests cinnamon isn't just masking the problem, it's actually improving the underlying insulin sensitivity. Something is changing at the cellular level, and it takes time to fade. That is not what a sugar pill does. That is what a functional compound does. And I want to make something really clear here. The wrong reason most people dismiss cinnamon for fasting glucose is they think, well, I'd have to eat cinnamon in the middle of the night for it to affect my morning number. No, that's not how this works. The improvement in fasting glucose comes from improved insulin sensitivity, not from cinnamon acting in real time. Your cells become more responsive. Your liver becomes less trigger-happy with glucose production. These are changes that build over days and weeks. You take cinnamon with your meals during the day, and the benefit shows up in the morning. That's an important distinction. Because it means you don't need to set an alarm at 3 a.m. to take a supplement. You just need consistency during waking hours. And the downstream effect takes care of the rest. Now, number 5. And this goes to the root of why blood sugar gets worse with age. If you've ever wondered why your medications keep increasing, this is the answer. Number 5. And this one is, I think this is the one most people need to hear, because this is the root cause. Remember what I said earlier about the lock being jammed? The insulin key is there, but the door won't open. That's insulin resistance. And it's not just a label. It's a physical, structural problem at the surface of your cells. Your insulin receptors, the actual protein structures on the outside of your cells that recognize insulin, they get clogged, desensitized. They stop responding the way they should, now. Here's what cinnamon polyphenols do. And this has been demonstrated in lab studies on both muscle cells and fat cells. Cinnamon polyphenols upregulate the expression of insulin receptor beta. That's the part of the receptor that sits inside the cell and triggers the cascade. When insulin receptor beta is more active, the whole signaling chain works better. Insulin binds, the receptor fires. GLUT4 moves to the surface. Sugar enters the cell. It's not adding more insulin. It's not forcing a broken system to work harder. It's repairing the system. And there's something else. Cinnamon also inhibits a protein called PTP1B, protein tyrosine phosphatase 1B. This is the protein that turns off the insulin signal. Think of it as the off switch. In people with insulin resistance, this off switch is overactive. It shuts down insulin signaling too quickly. Cinnamon dials that down, which means insulin's message stays active longer. Your cells have more time to respond. That's 2 mechanisms in one ranked item. Upregulating the receptor, inhibiting the off switch, both working together to unjam the lock. And the practical result? In the 2024 crossover trial using continuous glucose monitoring, the most sensitive method available, participants taking 4 grams of cinnamon daily showed significantly lower 24-hour glucose concentrations compared to placebo. Not just fasting, not just after meals, all day long. That is what improved insulin sensitivity looks like in real life. And I want you to sit with that for a second, because we talk about insulin resistance like it's a permanent sentence. Like once you've got it, that's it. Your pancreas is failing. Your cells are broken. Take the pills. But what if the cells aren't broken? What if the receptors are just underperforming, underexpressed, switched off too quickly? Because that's what the research suggests. And cinnamon, of all things, appears to address each of those problems. It upregulates the receptor. It inhibits the off switch. It activates AMPK to open an alternative glucose pathway. 3 corrections from one compound family. Your doctor calls insulin resistance a chronic condition. The research suggests it might be more like a chronic deficiency, a deficiency of the right signals. And cinnamon provides some of those signals. Not all of them, not enough to replace medication, but enough to move the needle. And for a lot of people over 60, that needle is the difference between adding a third medication and not. Number 4. And this is the number your doctor actually cares about. HbA1c, hemoglobin A1c. It's the 3-month average of your blood sugar. It tells you not what happened today, not what happened after breakfast, but what your blood sugar has been doing day after day, night after night, for 90 days straight. And this is the number that determines whether your doctor increases your medication, whether they add a second drug, whether they start talking about insulin injections. A 2024 meta-analysis, the most comprehensive one to date, pooling 24 randomized controlled trials, found that cinnamon supplementation significantly reduced HbA1c compared to placebo. The weighted mean difference was 0.56%. Now, 0.56% might not sound like much, but let me put that in context. Metformin, the most commonly prescribed diabetes drug in the world, typically reduces HbA1c by about 1 to 1.5%. So, cinnamon is producing roughly 1/3 to 1/2 the effect of a pharmaceutical drug, without the side effects, without the prescription, without the copay. And here's what I want you to understand. Nobody, not me, not this video, is telling you to stop your medication. That is not what this is about. This is about adding a tool, a safe, inexpensive, food-based tool that moves the needle in the right direction. But the fact that most endocrinologists don't even mention it as an adjunct therapy, that's the part that frustrates me. Because the evidence is right there. And here's something else that doesn't get discussed. The cost. A 90-day supply of metformin with insurance might cost you $15 to $40 depending on your plan. Without insurance? Higher. A 90-day supply of Ceylon cinnamon? $6 to $10 for the whole quarter. Now, metformin does more. It has decades of data. It's a proven drug, and I respect it. But as an add-on? As something that chips away at your HbA1c from the other direction, safely, without side effects, at almost no cost? The math is obvious. And yet, silence from the medical community. I've talked to people in the comments of my videos who reduced their HbA1c by a full point after 6 months of consistent cinnamon use alongside their medications. That's anecdotal. I know, it's not a clinical trial, but it lines up perfectly with what the meta-analyses show. And that matters. Let's move to number 3. And this is the one that answers the question in the title. The 23% drop. After one meal. Here's where that comes from. And you know what's interesting? Most of the damage to your HbA1c doesn't happen during the day. It happens at night. Between about 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., your body goes through metabolic shifts that most people over 60 have no idea about. The liver dumps glucose, cortisol rises, and your blood sugar climbs while you're asleep, completely unaware. That right there is why I wrote The Midnight Insulin Trap. It covers what actually happens to your blood sugar and your blood pressure while you sleep, and how to build a simple nighttime system that works with your body instead of against it. The link is in the description below. But let me keep going, because the top 3 on this list, they're a different level. Number 3. And this one is the reason the title of this video says, After One Meal. The 2003 Kahn study, the one I mentioned earlier, showed fasting glucose drops of 18 to 29% over 40 days. But here's what gets lost in the headlines. The improvements in postprandial glucose, blood sugar after eating, were visible within the first week of supplementation. The first week. And a separate study, a 12-week trial, found that subjects taking 1,000 milligrams of cinnamon cassia per day showed an average decrease in blood sugar of about 30 milligrams per deciliter. And the researchers specifically noted the decreases became apparent within 1 week of starting supplementation. Think about what that means. You start on Monday. by the following Monday, your after-meal numbers are already lower. Not dramatically, not dangerously, just measurably, consistently lower. And here's the thing that makes this different from medication. Medication forces a reduction. It pushes your system. Cinnamon appears to restore a natural response. It helps your body do what it's supposed to do. There's a difference. One is a crutch. The other is rehabilitation. Now, the wrong reason. Real reason split. Most people think cinnamon lowers post-meal blood sugar because it slows digestion. That's partly true. We covered that in number 7. But the real reason? It's the GLUT4 translocation and the insulin receptor sensitization I explained earlier. The gastric emptying is a minor player. The cellular level change is the main event. And the 2024 continuous glucose monitoring trial confirmed this. Lower glucose peaks, lower 24-hour glucose, and reduced glucose variability, meaning fewer spikes and crashes throughout the day. That's not slower digestion. That's improved cellular function. And practically speaking, what does this mean for your daily life? It means that the bread you had at dinner, the rice, the potato, if you had cinnamon with that meal, mixed into the food or taken alongside it, the spike that would normally hit 30 to 60 minutes later is blunted. Not eliminated. Blunted. Smoothed out. Your blood sugar rises more gently, peaks lower, and comes back down faster. Over the course of a day, that's 3 meals with lower spikes. Over a week, that's 21 meals. Over a month, hundreds of glucose events where your blood sugar stayed closer to normal. And each one of those events matters, because it's the spikes, the repeated daily meal after meal spikes that cause the long-term damage, the nerve damage, the kidney damage, the retinopathy, not just the high average, the individual peaks. Cinnamon doesn't eliminate the peaks, but it lowers them. Consistently, from the very first week. All right, number 2, and this is where we cross from useful supplement territory into something more profound, because this is about changing how your genes express themselves. Number 2, and, okay, this is where it gets serious. Because we're not talking about surface-level effects anymore. We're talking about gene expression. Studies have shown that cinnamaldehyde, the primary active compound in cinnamon, upregulates the expression of the GLUT4 gene itself. Not just the protein, the gene, the instruction manual inside your cells that tells them how many glucose transporters to build. In one study, skeletal muscle cells treated with cinnamaldehyde showed a 3-fold increase in GLUT4 mRNA. That means the cells weren't just using the transporters they already had more efficiently. They were building more of them, manufacturing new doors. And there's more. Cinnamon polyphenols have been shown to activate PPAR gamma. That's peroxisome proliferator activated receptor gamma. This is the same receptor targeted by thiazolidinediones, a class of diabetes drugs. PPAR gamma activation improves insulin sensitivity throughout the body. It changes how fat cells store energy. It changes how liver cells handle glucose. It changes how muscle cells respond to insulin. But thiazolidinediones come with side effects: weight gain, fluid retention, bone loss, heart failure risk in some patients. Cinnamon activates the same pathway. And its most common side effect? Your kitchen smells nice. Now I'm being a little cheeky there, but the point is real. The pharmaceutical industry spent billions developing PPAR gamma agonists, marketing them, getting them approved, building entire product lines around this one receptor pathway. And a compound that gently activates the same receptor sits in a spice jar for $2. That's not a conspiracy. That's economics. There's no money in cinnamon. There's no patent. There's no exclusivity period. So there's no incentive for anyone in the pharmaceutical supply chain to promote it. Which means the only way you hear about it is from someone like me, or from the research directly, which most people will never read. Let me tell you something else about the gene expression piece. When your cells build more GLUT4 transporters, more glucose doorways, that's not a temporary effect. That's a structural change. It takes time to happen, and it takes time to fade. Which explains why, in the Khan study, the benefits persisted for 20 days after stopping cinnamon. The extra transporters were still there, still working, still letting glucose in. That's fundamentally different from a drug that works only while it's in your bloodstream. This is your cells adapting, improving, building new infrastructure. And that's powerful for a spice. Now, number 1, the top of the list. And honestly, this one shook me when I first read it. Now look, I'm not saying cinnamon is as powerful as a pharmaceutical PPAR gamma agonist. It's not. But the fact that it touches the same pathway, gently, naturally, without the adverse effects, is remarkable. And the fact that this isn't part of standard diabetic education, that tells you something about how the system works. The system is built around prescriptions, not around kitchen spices, even when the kitchen spice has clinical evidence behind it. 1. It mimics insulin itself, the master key. 31, Joe. 34, Jout. Number 1. And this is the one I had to read twice, because this isn't an indirect effect. This isn't, it helps insulin work better. This is, cinnamon contains a compound that acts like insulin. MHCP, methyl hydroxychalcone polymer. This compound, isolated from cinnamon, has been shown to mimic the action of insulin at the cellular level. It activates the IRS-PI3K ACT signaling cascade. That's the exact pathway insulin uses to tell your cells to absorb glucose. Let me put that in plain language. Your body has a communication system. Insulin is the message. The receptors are the phones. The signaling cascade is the phone network. In type 2 diabetes, the phones are broken. The network is down. The message isn't getting through. MHCP picks up a different phone on the same network and sends the same message. It promotes glucose uptake. It promotes glycogen synthesis, which is your body's way of storing sugar safely in the liver and muscles instead of leaving it floating in the blood. And it inhibits GSK3 beta, glycogen synthase, kinase 3 beta, which is an enzyme that blocks glycogen storage. So it's doing 3 things at once: telling cells to absorb sugar, telling the liver to store sugar, and removing the block that prevents storage. That is why a 23% drop after one meal is possible. It's not one mechanism, it's a cascade. Multiple pathways firing simultaneously. All from a compound that exists naturally in a spice you can buy for $2 at any grocery store in America. And look, I need to be careful here, because I don't want you to hear this and think, great, I'll throw away my metformin. No, absolutely not. Cinnamon is not a replacement for medication. It's an adjunct, a partner, something that works alongside your treatment plan to give your body an extra edge. But the fact that most diabetics don't even know this option exists, that's not okay. And let me put this in perspective. There are over 37 million Americans with diabetes. Roughly 90% of them have type 2. The majority are over 50. Many of them are on 2, 3, sometimes 4 medications. And the trajectory for most of them is escalation. More pills, higher doses, eventually insulin injections. What if even 10% of those patients, 3.5 million people, knew about this, knew the right type to use, knew the right dosage, knew to talk to their doctor about adding it to their protocol? Would it eliminate diabetes? No, of course not. But would it slow the escalation for some of them? Would it reduce the number of people who cross from 2 medications to 3? Would it improve their morning numbers enough to give them a sense of control? The research says yes. The math says yes. And the silence from the medical establishment says, we have a problem. All right. Before you do anything with this information, you need to hear what comes next, because there's a critical safety issue that almost nobody talks about. And getting this wrong could cancel every benefit I just described and add a new problem on top of it. Okay, stop. Before you go to your kitchen and start dumping cinnamon into everything, I need to tell you something critical, because this is the part that could actually hurt you if you get it wrong. There are 2 types of cinnamon, and using the wrong one could damage your liver. The cinnamon you buy at most grocery stores in America, the one in the red-capped jar, the one that costs $2 or $3, that's cassia cinnamon. Sometimes labeled as Cinnamomum cassia, sometimes Cinnamomum burmannii, sometimes just cinnamon with no species listed. Cassia cinnamon contains a compound called coumarin. In small amounts, like what you'd sprinkle on oatmeal once in a while, it's fine. Your body can handle it. No problem. But in therapeutic doses, the doses used in the clinical trials, 1 to 6 grams per day, every day, the coumarin in cassia cinnamon starts to accumulate. And coumarin is hepatotoxic. It damages liver cells. The European Food Safety Authority has set a tolerable daily intake for coumarin at 0.1 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. For a 150-pound person, that's about 6.8 milligrams of coumarin per day. 1 teaspoon of cassia cinnamon can contain anywhere from 7 to 18 milligrams of coumarin. 1 teaspoon. Already over the limit. So if you're taking 1 to 3 grams of cassia cinnamon daily for blood sugar, you could be getting 2 to 3 times the safe coumarin limit, every single day, for months. And here's the thing that makes this dangerous. You won't feel it at first. Liver damage from coumarin is cumulative, silent, gradual. Your liver enzymes creep up, and by the time symptoms appear, the damage is already done. This is why some doctors dismiss cinnamon. They see the cassia studies and think, sure, it works for blood sugar, but the coumarin risk makes it impractical. And for cassia, they're right. But there's another type, Ceylon cinnamon, Cinnamomum verum, also called true cinnamon. Ceylon cinnamon contains approximately 0.004% coumarin. That's 250 times less than cassia. Essentially zero. You could take therapeutic doses of Ceylon cinnamon every day for years and never come close to the coumarin safety limit. So the rule is simple. If you're using cinnamon as a daily supplement for blood sugar, use Ceylon. Period. Not cassia, not Saigon, not Indonesian. Ceylon. And let me tell you how to tell them apart, because when they're ground into powder, they look almost identical. Same brown color, similar smell. The label is your only clue. If the label says Cinnamomum verum or Cinnamomum zeylanicum, that's Ceylon. That's what you want. If it says Cinnamomum cassia, Cinnamomum burmannii, or Cinnamomum laureiroi, that's one of the cassia varieties, high coumarin. Not safe for daily therapeutic use. And here's the sneaky part. If it just says cinnamon with no species listed, it's almost always cassia. Because cassia is cheaper. It's the default. It's what food manufacturers use. It's what most grocery stores stock. You have to specifically seek out Ceylon. It's like the generic brand versus the specific one. And in this case, the specific one is the safe one. Now, if you buy cinnamon sticks instead of powder, you can actually see the difference. Cassia sticks are thick, hard, and made of a single curled bark layer. They look like a chunky scroll. Ceylon sticks are thinner, more fragile, with multiple delicate layers rolled together, almost like a cigar. If you can crumble it easily between your fingers, it's probably Ceylon. If it's hard and woody, it's cassia. You can find Ceylon cinnamon online. It's more expensive, usually $8 to $12 for a jar compared to $3 for cassia. But we're talking about the difference between a safe daily practice and slow liver damage. Now, 3 more mistakes that cancel the benefit. Mistake 1. Taking cinnamon with a high sugar meal and thinking it cancels out the sugar. It doesn't. Cinnamon helps your body process glucose more efficiently. It does not neutralize a 400-calorie dessert. It's a partner, not an eraser. Mistake 2. Taking cinnamon capsules on an empty stomach. Some people report stomach irritation. The studies that showed the best results added cinnamon to food, sprinkled on meals, mixed into warm water, blended into smoothies. Food-based delivery works better and reduces GI irritation. Mistake 3. combining high-dose cinnamon with blood sugar-lowering medication without telling your doctor. Because cinnamon does work, and if it stacks on top of your metformin or sulfonylurea, your blood sugar could drop too low. That's hypoglycemia. And in a senior, that can cause dizziness, falls, confusion, even loss of consciousness. Tell your doctor you're adding cinnamon. Let them monitor. This is about partnership, not secrecy. Mistake 4. Assuming all Ceylon cinnamon products are actually Ceylon. This is a real problem. The supplement industry is poorly regulated. Some products labeled Ceylon have been tested and found to contain cassia or a blend. Buy from reputable brands that provide third-party testing. Look for the botanical name, Cinnamomum verum, on the label. If the label just says cinnamon with no species, walk away. And one more thing I need to address. Some of you are going to read about cinnamon and blood thinners. Coumarin, the compound in cassia cinnamon, has a chemical structure similar to warfarin, which is a blood thinner. Now, the coumarin in cinnamon is not the same as pharmaceutical warfarin. It's structurally related but functionally different. That said, if you're on blood thinners, warfarin, Eliquis, Xarelto, any of them, you need to talk to your doctor before adding cinnamon, not because cinnamon is dangerous, but because any compound that interacts with the same metabolic pathway deserves monitoring. Caution is not fear. Caution is intelligence. Now, one more thing before we wrap up. If everything in this video covered what happens during the day, after meals, in the morning while you're awake, then the question you should be asking is, what happens at night? Because for most people over 60, the nighttime hours are when the real damage happens. Your liver dumps glucose, your cortisol surges, your blood pressure shifts, and your morning number climbs, even though you did everything right during the day. That is exactly why I created the Midnight Insulin Trap. It walks you through what changes in your body after 60, why your morning numbers are high, even when your daytime numbers look fine, and how to build a simple nighttime system. Food timing, meal structure, a 7-day reset you can start tonight. The link is right below this video. I think you'll find it answers questions your doctor doesn't have time to explain. Okay, here's what to do. Simple, no overwhelm. 3 steps. Step 1. Get Ceylon cinnamon, not cassia. Look for the words Cinnamomum verum, or Ceylon, on the label. If it just says cinnamon, assume it's cassia. Online retailers typically have more options. Expect to pay $8 to $12, worth every cent. Step 2. Start with 1 gram per day. That's about half a teaspoon. Add it to your food, oatmeal, yogurt, warm water with a squeeze of lemon, coffee, whatever you already eat in the morning. Stay at 1 gram for 2 weeks. Track your fasting blood sugar each morning. Watch the trend. Step 3. After 2 weeks, if you're tolerating it well, increase to 2 grams. That's roughly 1 teaspoon, split between 2 meals, morning and evening. Continue tracking. And, this part is important, tell your doctor, show them your numbers. Let them see the trend. Because when a doctor sees data, they listen. And here's a bonus tip. Cinnamon works best when taken with carbohydrates, not separately, not on an empty stomach, with your food. The reason is simple. The mechanisms I described, the gastric emptying, the GLUT4 translocation, the insulin receptor sensitization, they're most active when glucose is present. So if you're having rice, oatmeal, bread, potatoes, that's when you add the cinnamon. It meets the glucose right at the moment it needs to be processed. One more thing. Don't boil cinnamon for extended periods. Some of the active compounds, particularly cinnamaldehyde, are volatile. They break down with prolonged high heat. Warm water is fine. Adding it to food after cooking is fine. Stirring it into a warm drink is fine. But simmering it in a pot for 45 minutes. You're losing potency, simple, practical, affordable, and backed by more clinical evidence than some prescription drugs. That's it. 1 spice, 2 weeks to see initial changes, a conversation with your doctor, no prescriptions, no side effects, no risk if you use the right type. And one final thought before we move on. I know that some of you have been managing diabetes for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and over that time, you've been told a lot of things. Some of them were helpful, some of them were wrong, and a few of them were just incomplete. This video isn't about replacing what you've learned. It's about adding one more tool to your toolkit. A tool that costs almost nothing, has virtually no side effects when used correctly, and has been validated by more clinical research than most people realize. You deserve to have that information. Every diabetic does. And if your doctor pushes back when you mention it, and some will, just ask them this. Have you read the 2024